The most terrifying night of my life began at 2:15 a.m. when the front door creaked softly. Looking through my bedroom window, I saw my son walking towards the raging river, clutching a black plastic-covered basket. A bad feeling compelled me to quietly follow him. When I saw him place the basket in the turbulent water and turn away, I knew something terrible was about to happen. I plunged into the icy river. When I opened the lid of the basket, I was speechless. Oh my God! Thank you for being here with me today. Before we dive in, leave me a comment below. Where are you listening from, and what time is it there? I read every comment, and your voice matters here. A quick note. Some details in this story are fictionalized to emphasize the deeper lesson. What truly matters is the message it carries. The worst night of my life began with the soft creak of a door at 2:15 in the morning while an Ohio storm tried to tear my house apart. I was already awake. I'd been awake since midnight, lying fully dressed in the spare bedroom at 412 River Street, with my boots laced, tracking the thunder intervals, and waiting for something I couldn't name but knew was coming. My name is Otis Howard. I'm 52 years old, and I spent 28 years in private security before retiring to what I thought would be a quiet life in Marietta, Ohio. The door creak came from downstairs Julian's room. I moved to the hallway without turning on lights. The storm hammered the roof rain sheeting against windows like static. I descended the stairs in darkness and pushed open his door. Empty, bed made, military tight, not slept in, dresser drawers hanging open, and under the bed where I'd seen him hide the black plastic-wrapped basket 3 days ago, nothing. Through the rain-streaked window, I saw my son Julian, 25 years old, moving like a ghost toward the swollen Ohio River. He wore full rain gear, something pressed against his chest. Lightning flashed, and I caught the shape the black bundle cradled in both arms. Where the hell is he going? But I knew. God help me, I knew. I'd been watching him for 6 weeks, documenting every strange behavior, every midnight, prowl to the river's edge, every paranoid accusation. The basket under his bed wasn't for storage. The way he'd been measuring distances to the water, testing current speed with sticks. This was reconnaissance, operational planning. And tonight, with the river swollen from 3 days of rain and a storm providing perfect cover, Julian was executing his plan. I moved. I grabbed my oilskin slicker from the mudroom and slipped out the back door into the deluge. The rain hit like 1,000 cold fists, soaking through to skin in seconds. I stayed low, used the shed for cover, and watched. Julian was at the water's edge now, maybe 60 yards away. He dragged a small aluminum rowboat from the cattails and placed the black bundle carefully in the bottom, almost tenderly. Then, he pushed off into the swollen current. The boat disappeared into the darkness and rain. Not tonight. God, not tonight. I sprinted to the maintenance shed and yanked open the door. Inside sat the 14-foot skiff with the 9.9 horsepower motor I'd pre-positioned there 2 weeks ago, after Graham had looked at my surveillance notes and said in his flat ex-cop voice that if Julian moved, I'd have 90 seconds, maybe less. The fuel tank was full. I'd checked it yesterday. I shoved the skiff down the muddy bank and pulled the starter cord. The engine caught on the first pull, smooth, reliable, ready. I fed it just enough throttle to stay mobile without roaring. The continuous thunder provided acoustic cover. Julian wouldn't hear me coming. I pulled out my phone sealed in a waterproof case and typed 2 words to Graham, "Go now?" Then I stalked my son across the black water. The current was vicious, pulling hard toward the main channel. I stayed 20 meters back, standard trailing distance from my executive protection days. Lightning provided intermittent illumination. Julian rowing with mechanical precision, the black bundle secured between his knees. Stay 20 meters back. Standard trailing protocol. My hands were steady on the tiller, but my mind screamed questions I couldn't afford to process. The Julian I raised wouldn't hurt a spider. The Julian sitting in that rowboat had spent 6 weeks planning something I didn't want to name. How do you process the moment you realize your son is trying to kill your grandson? You don't. You just keep the engine steady and wait for the moment to act. Julian stopped rowing at mid-channel, maybe 40 yards from either shore. The deepest point. The fastest current. He shipped his oars and stood a dangerous move in a small boat in this chop and lifted the black bundle. I cut the engine, let momentum carry me closer in silence. He cradled the bundle for a long moment, lips moving, saying something I couldn't hear over the storm. Then he placed it carefully on the water's surface. The basket floated. Foam core construction, waterproof seal. Julian had engineered this. He'd built a vessel that would float long enough for the current to carry it far downstream. long enough for hypothermia to do its work without leaving obvious injury. He rode away into the darkness, never looking back. I fired the engine, closed the distance in 15 seconds, and hauled the floating basket aboard in one motion. My hands shook as I popped the latches. Inside was my grandson. Silas' lips, tinged blue from the cold eyes, barely open, but breathing. I've got you, buddy." I pressed my fingers to his neck, pulse thready but present. Wrapped him against my chest inside my slicker, feeling his tiny body trembling. He was soaked through the first layer, but the waterproofing had held on the inner blanket. Julian had built this basket to float, to protect even in his madness. Some part of him had tried to make it gentle. Breathe, come on Silas, breathe for me." I aimed the skiff toward the shallow bank and pushed the throttle wide open. The engine screamed. We covered the distance in 40 seconds, and I ran the bow straight into the mud, vaulting out with Silas locked against my chest. My knees hit the mud, and I couldn't tell rain from tears. Somewhere downriver, police sirens wailed through the storm, Graham's units converging on Julian's projected landing point. I'd given them the GPS coordinates 3 days ago, mapped every possible exit from the river. They'd catch him. Police lights strobed blue and red through the downpour as I wrapped Silas tighter against my chest, his tiny heart beating against mine. But to understand how a 52-year-old retired security consultant ended up diving into a freezing river to save his grandson from his own son, I need to go back 4 months to the day Julian showed up on my doorstep with a newborn in his arms and his entire life in ruins. 4 months earlier, I drove 14 hours straight through the night to be there when my grandson was born. June 3rd, 2023. I left Marietta at 6 p.m., took Route 33 north through the darkening hills of Ohio toward Toledo. Julian had called 3 days before with the news that Evelyn was in labor. Due date moved up, baby coming early. He'd sounded strained on the phone, distracted, but I'd chalked it up to first-time father nerves. I didn't stop except for gas and coffee. 14 hours of highway hypnosis and optimism, imagining meeting my first grandchild, thinking maybe this would be the thing that bridged the growing distance between Julian and me. He'd been pulling away for months, ever since the wedding calls, getting shorter, excuses multiplying, Evelyn always in the background, with reasons why visits wouldn't work. But a baby changes everything. That's what I told myself through the long, dark miles. I arrived at Toledo General Hospital at 8 a.m., exhausted but running on adrenaline. Found the maternity ward, asked at the desk for Julian Howard's room. The nurse gave me directions with a tired smile. I made it halfway down the corridor before Julian appeared. He stepped out of a doorway like he'd been waiting for me, blocking my path. His face was drawn eyes, red-rimmed from sleeplessness. And when he saw me, his expression didn't light up, it collapsed. Dad, what are you doing here?" The question landed wrong. Not surprised, not pleased, almost accusatory. "You said the baby was coming. I wanted to be here." He glanced back at the closed door behind him, then stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Evelyn doesn't want you around right now. It's complicated. She needs space." 14 hours. I'd driven 14 hours overnight to meet my grandson, and I was being turned away at the door like an unwanted salesman. "Julian, I'm not here to cause problems. I just wanted to—" "I know, but now's not a good time. Maybe in a few weeks when things settle down." He wouldn't meet my eyes. Behind him, through the small window in the door, I could see movement, a nurse, maybe Evelyn. My grandson was 15 feet away and I wasn't allowed to meet him. "Congratulations, son," I said quietly. "Call me when you're ready." I turned and walked back down that corridor, past the nurse's station, into the elevator, through the parking garage to my truck. Then I drove 14 hours back to Marietta, in silence, telling myself they just needed time. New mothers are protective. It's natural. He'll call when she's ready. What do you do when the son who just shut you out is the same son you drive 14 hours for without hesitation? You wait. You give them space. You check your phone compulsively for 4 days and tell yourself it's fine, it's normal. First-time parents are overwhelmed and they'll reach out when the dust settles. June 4th, June 5th, June 6th. No call, no text, no photo of my grandson whose name I didn't even know. I worked around the house, kept busy, forced optimism. Evelyn's influence was temporary. Julian would come around. Family always does. Then June 7th at 3 a.m., my phone shattered the silence. I grabbed it from the nightstand, heart already hammering. Julian's name on the screen. "Hello? Dad, she's gone. Evelyn's gone, and she took everything." His voice was wrecked, barely coherent through ragged breathing. Behind him, I could hear it high-pitched, desperate, a baby crying. Slow down. What happened? She left. 4 days ago, the day after we came home from the hospital. I woke up and she was gone. All her stuff, all the cash, the bank accounts emptied. She took everything. I was fully awake now, sitting up, trying to process. You've been alone with the baby for 4 days and you didn't call. I thought she was coming back. I thought she just needed time to clear her head. But today the debt collectors started calling and his voice cracked. Dad, there's a mortgage on your house. $145,000. The room tilted. What are you talking about? Only besig and I'm in mind. I forged your signature. God help me, I forged it because she said we needed it for the baby. She said her credit was bad and we had to use your house as collateral and she'd pay it all back before you ever knew. And I believed her. Evelyn, 24, and Julian's wife of 8 months, had vanished 4 days after giving birth, taking every dollar she could steal and leaving only destruction behind. You forged my signature. Not a question. A statement of fact that I needed to say aloud to believe it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know what I did. But Dad, the baby Silas, he won't stop crying, and I don't know what I'm doing. Debt collectors are already calling. I have nowhere to go. Social services said if I can't provide stable housing by tomorrow, they're taking him into protective custody. The baby's cry cut through the line. Thin, desperate, completely unaware, his 7-day-old life was already a catastrophe. That's my house, Julian. My home. You put my home on the line without asking me. I know, Dad. I'm sorry. But the baby... Let me think. Just let me think. I stood up, paced to the kitchen phone, pressed to my ear. Outside the window, the Ohio night was absolute black, no moon, just the distant lights of the river blinking through the trees. $145,000. My retirement savings would have to cover it. Years of careful planning gone, in one forged signature. Julian, my son, who I'd driven 14 hours to see who would turn me away at the hospital door, had betrayed me as thoroughly as the woman who just abandoned him. But that baby hadn't asked for any of this. Where are you right now? The apartment in Toledo. Lease is up in 3 days. I can't renew it. I have nothing left. 7 days old. Silas was 7 days old, and his mother was gone. His father was breaking, and I was the only thing standing between him and the foster system. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the kitchen table at 3:47 a.m. Through the speaker, Julian's ragged breathing mixed with Silas's wailing. My retirement, my home, my trust, all of it gone in one forged signature. But that baby hadn't asked for any of this. Dawn was 2 hours away, and I had to decide which kind of father I was going to be. Dawn came at 6 o'clock, and with it came my son kneeling on my front porch in the gray morning light, holding a 7-day-old baby like an offering. I'd spent the 2 hours since his phone call pacing the kitchen, wrestling with equations that had no good answer. The debt, the betrayal, the forged signature, the innocent child. Every calculation came back to the same impossible sum. I could protect my retirement and my peace, or I could save my grandson. Not both. Julian didn't knock. He just knelt there on the weathered board, Silas wrapped in a thin hospital blanket, his eyes red from a sleepless night that probably matched mine. Through the window, I watched him for 30 seconds. My son reduced to this. Broke. Abandoned. Holding the only thing he had left. I opened the door. I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside and opened it wider. Julian looked up at me, searching my face for anger or forgiveness, or some combination he could parse. I gave him nothing, just gestured him inside. He stood slowly, careful not to jostle the baby, and crossed the threshold. Behind him on the porch sat a single duffel bag, everything he owned in the world apparently. I grabbed it and followed him in, closing the door on the dawn. Your old room is the same. I said my first word since he'd arrived. Set up however you need for the baby. Thank you, Dad. I don't just take care of him. Julian's throat worked. He nodded and headed for the stairs, still cradling Silas against his chest, like the child might shatter if he loosened his grip. I stood in my entryway for a long time after they disappeared upstairs, staring at nothing, feeling the weight of the choice I'd just made settle onto my shoulders like wet concrete. That evening, I lay awake in my bedroom, listening to the sounds filtering through the walls. Julian's old room shared a wall with mine, the same wall I'd lain against 25 years ago, when he was the infant keeping me up at night. Now, the cycle had spun forward a generation, and I was on the other side listening. Midnight. Soft footsteps creaked across old floorboards. Water running in the bathroom, warming a bottle, probably. Then Julian's voice low and gentle. "It's okay, buddy. I've got you. Daddy's got you." The words came through the drywall clear enough that I could hear the exhaustion in them, but also the tenderness. Silas must have been fussing, because Julian started humming a melody I recognized instantly. The same lullaby I'd sung to him 2 decades ago when he couldn't sleep. He remembered every word. I closed my eyes and listened to my son sing to his son, and felt something crack open in my chest that I'd been holding shut since the 3 a.m. phone call. At 3 a.m., the pattern repeated. Footsteps. Water. Julian's voice softer this time, almost conversational. "I'm sorry for everything, little man. Your mom, she's gone. And I messed up so bad. But I'm going to be better. I promise you that. I'm going to be the dad you deserve." Silas made a small sound, not quite crying, just baby noises. I know it's scary. But Grandpa's here now. He's going to help us. He's always helped me even when I didn't deserve it. Can love for a grandchild erase betrayal by a son, or does it just bury the wound under hope? I didn't have an answer. I just lay there in the dark listening and let myself believe that maybe this would be enough to pull Julian back from whatever edge he'd been standing on. The days that followed gave me more reasons to hope. Julian rose for every feeding without complaint. The 2 a.m. cycle, the 5 a.m. cycle, the 8 a.m. routine, he handled all of it. I'd hear him moving through the house at odd hours, changing diapers on the bed I'd set up in his room, bathing Silas in the kitchen sink with a gentleness that surprised me. By the 3rd day, he'd mastered the swaddle, the tight wrap that keeps infants calm. I watched from the hallway as he did it, his movements careful, and practiced talking to Silas the whole time about nothing and everything. "There we go, snug as a bug." That's what Grandpa used to say to me, snug as a bug in a rug. He'd checked out parenting books from the library, 3 of them stacked on his nightstand. Started keeping a notebook, tracking feeding times, diaper changes, sleep patterns. The kind of organized caregiving I'd never expected from my son, who drifted through community college and quit 2 different jobs in the past year. Maybe I'd been wrong about him. Maybe the baby was exactly what he needed to find purpose, stability, responsibility. I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to believe it. But my security training had taught me that wanting something to be true doesn't make it true. So even as I watched Julian tend to Silas with devotion that looked real, I started keeping notes anyway. Old habits from 28 years of protection, work document everything, trust nothing. June 8th. Julian up for all 3 night feedings. Patient with diaper changes. June 10th, took Silas for walk and stroller. Returned after 1 hour. Baby calm. June 12th. Read to Silas for 30 minutes. Voice gentle, engaged. Small observations. Harmless details. Insurance, my brain told me. Just insurance. June 14th came 1 week since Julian had knelt on my porch. That evening, I stood in the doorway of his room, watching him rock Silas to sleep. The lamplight soft on both their faces, Julian humming that same lullaby under his breath. The scene was so normal, so tender, that for a moment I could almost forget the massive debt hanging over my retirement, the forged signature, the wife who'd vanished with every dollar she could steal. "I think he's out," Julian whispered, looking up at me with something like peace in his eyes. "You're doing good with him," I said, meant it. "And thanks, Dad, for everything. I know I don't deserve. The focus on him, that's what matters now." Julian nodded and carefully transferred Silas to the bassinet we'd bought at the thrift store. The baby stirred, but didn't wake. I watched them together in the lamplight and thought, this is going to be okay. We're going to be okay. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The change came on the 8th night when Silas's 2 a.m. cry went unanswered for the first time since Julian arrived. June 15th. I woke to the familiar wail of a hungry baby, but instead of Julian's footsteps and running water, there was only silence. Silas kept crying. I waited in the dark, listening. Julian's door never opened. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The crying escalated from hunger to panic. I got up and walked to Julian's room. The door was closed, no light underneath. I knocked softly. "Julian." "Nothing." "Julian, the baby needs a bottle." I opened the door. He was lying in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. "Julian." "I'm tired," he said flatly. "Can you get it?" "Sure, get some rest." I closed the door and went to warm a bottle. Just exhaustion, I told myself. New fathers get exhausted. One missed feeding doesn't mean anything. But something in my chest had gone cold. The next night he missed the 5 a.m. feeding too. By June 18th, he was sleeping through the morning, feeding as well. I started filling the gaps quietly without confronting what I was seeing. I'd get up for the 2 a.m. cry, then 5 a.m., then wake him at 8 so he could at least be present during daylight. He'd stumble out, take Silas for an hour, then retreat to his room. By June 20th, even daytime interactions had changed. I found Julian sitting in the armchair, staring at the wall, while Silas screamed in his bouncer 3 feet away. Not crying for a specific need, just fussing, wanting to be held. Julian didn't move. "Can you pick him up?" I asked. Julian blinked slowly, looked down at Silas as if noticing him for the first time. "Oh, yeah." He lifted the baby with stiff arms, holding him away from his body like handling a package. No eye contact, no soothing words. Within 30 seconds, he'd set Silas back in the bouncer and returned to staring at nothing. I picked up my grandson and held him against my chest, feeling his body relax immediately. "I need to run to the store. Can you watch him for an hour?" "Sure," Julian said. His voice was empty. I didn't go to the store. I stood in the kitchen for 45 minutes listening. Silas fussed twice. Julian never moved from the chair. Watching someone withdraw from their own child is like watching drowning in slow motion. Each day they sink a little deeper, and you keep believing the next breath will bring them back up. By June 23rd, Julian had stopped touching Silas entirely unless directly instructed. He'd walk past the baby carrier to get to the kitchen, stepping over it like furniture. When Silas had a diaper blowout requiring full cleanup and a bath, Julian stood in the doorway watching me handle it, then left without offering help. I was doing everything now. Every feeding, every change, every middle of the night soothing. I was 52 years old, running on 4 hours a night, doing the work of 2 parents, while the actual father sat in his room with the door closed. June 25th, I asked him directly, "Julian, are you okay? You've been distant with Silas." He looked at me with hollow eyes. "I'm fine, just tired. If you need help, if this is too much, we can talk to someone." I said I'm fine. He walked away mid-conversation. June 27th. I found him standing in the kitchen at 2 in the afternoon, staring at the wall above the sink. Silas was screaming in the living room, had been screaming for 5 minutes. Julian didn't react when I walked past him to get the baby. Didn't turn when I spoke his name, just stood there frozen. I picked up Silas and held him, while he cried himself into exhausted hiccups against my shoulder. Still, I didn't confront him. Couldn't fully admit what I was watching. But denial has limits. June 28th, late evening. Julian walked past Silas, who was crying in the bouncer arms, reaching up without even glancing down. Just stepped over him, got water, and returned to his room. I stood there holding my grandson, watching my son's door close, and something inside me shifted from fatherhood to something colder, something professional. I went to my study and pulled out a blank notebook, the same type I'd used for surveillance work over 28 years. Black cover, gridded pages, space for dates and observations. I opened it to the first page and wrote the date. June 28th, 2023, day 1 of formal observation. Then I began documenting everything I'd been trying not to see. Subject exhibits complete disengagement from infant dependent. Night feedings abandoned June 15th. Physical contact ceased June 23rd. Verbal interaction minimal since June 20th. Subject spends 16 to 18 hours per day, isolated in bedroom. No indication of substance use. No visitors. Pattern consistent with severe dissociative episode or emotional withdrawal. The hardest thing I ever did was write my son's name at the top of a surveillance log. But something had broken in Julian that I couldn't fix with patience or hope or love. And Silas, 8 weeks old now, completely dependent, deserved better than a grandfather in denial. I'd spent 28 years learning how to watch people document behavior-build cases. Never imagined I'd use those skills on my own son. But if I was going to do this, if I was going to watch him, monitor him, gather evidence, I'd do it right. No more hope masquerading as observation. No more telling myself tomorrow would be different. Just facts, just patterns, just the cold truth of what was happening under my roof. The notebook sat open on my desk under the lamp day 1, documented in clinical detail. I'd investigated dozens of cases in 28 years, but never one where the subject sleeping 30 feet away shared my last name. The question keeping me awake wasn't whether to watch him anymore. It was what I'd do when I finally had enough evidence to act. The first time I found Julian at the river was 3 nights after I started the notebook, 2:15 in the morning. His room empty, his silhouette frozen at the water's edge like a ghost. June 29th. I'd gotten up to check on Silas and noticed Julian's door standing open. The bed was empty. I moved to the window overlooking the backyard. The moon was 3/4 full, bright enough to throw shadows. Julian stood at the water's edge, maybe 60 yards out, perfectly still, arms at his sides, staring at the dark current. I watched him for 20 minutes. He didn't move. At 3 a.m., he turned and walked back. I heard him come through the back door, heard his bedroom door close softly. The next morning I asked about it. "I heard you go out last night. Everything okay?" He looked at me with those flat eyes. "The river at night, it's the only place my head goes quiet. The sound of the water calms my mind, helps me process everything." "Process what?" "Everything. Evelyn leaving, the baby, all of it." He said it like it was reasonable. "I'm not doing anything wrong, Dad. Just standing there." I nodded, didn't push. That night I logged it. Day 3 subject, observed at river 2:15 to 3:10 a.m. Behavior, frozen non-responsive to environment. The next night, July 1st, he did it again. Same time, 2:15 a.m. departure, 3:10 a.m. return. July 2nd, same pattern. July 3rd, same pattern. 4 nights, same time, same spot, same duration. In security work patterns that precise mean planning, grief doesn't operate on a schedule, but reconnaissance does. The night of July 3rd, I followed him. I waited 10 minutes, then slipped out and moved through the tree line, parallel to the river. Stayed 30 yards back, used the darkness and oak cover. Julian stood in the exact same spot he'd occupied every previous night. Not approximately exact, like he'd marked it. He faced the same section of current, arms at his sides, head tilted at the same angle. I watched him for the full 55 minutes. He never moved, just stared at the water like he was solving an equation. What does a man see when he stares at dark water at 2:15 every morning? Peace or a solution? I wrote it all down. Pattern now, consistent subject. Conducting nightly reconnaissance of river access point. Behavior suggests preparation or planning, not grief processing. He wasn't just staring at water, he was measuring something. July 5th broke me. I had to run to the bank to handle paperwork for the mortgage debt. Left at 10 a.m., told Julian I'd be back by noon. Asked if he could watch Silas for 2 hours. "Sure," he said, flat, empty. I got back at 12:15. The sound hit me the moment I opened the door. Silas screaming, not the normal cry of a baby, but the hoarse, ragged wail of a child who'd been crying so long his voice had started to give out. I dropped my keys and ran to the living room. Silas was in his bouncer face, crimson and swollen eyes, squeezed shut, mouth open in a scream that barely produced sound. His body shook with the effort. His voice was damaged. Julian sat on the couch 3 feet away, wearing headphones, staring at the wall. I scooped Silas up. His onesie was soaked through with sweat and tears. His cry had gone hoarse, the sound you only get after hours of sustained screaming. "How long has he been crying?" Julian didn't respond. He couldn't hear me. I pulled one side of his headphones away. "How long has he been crying?" Julian blinked slowly. "I don't know. A while, I guess." "A while." "Oh, you're home," he said, completely flat. Zero emotion, no apology, no concern, no acknowledgement that anything was wrong. "You were sitting right there." Julian shrugged. I had my headphones on. Like that explained everything. Like deliberately blocking out your screaming infant was reasonable. I walked away before I said something I couldn't take back. Silas drank his bottle, desperately hiccuping between gulps. It took 2 hours for his voice to recover. That night I sat at my desk and wrote it all down. Clinical, precise. July 5th, 12:15 p.m. Returned home to find infant subject in severe distress. Estimated crying duration 3+ hours based on voice hoarseness. Primary caregiver located 36 inches from infant wearing headphones to block auditory input. Subject displayed flat effect. No awareness of distress, severity, no emotional response. Active choice to ignore infant suffering documented. The worst evidence I ever documented was my own son's complete absence of love. I looked at 3 weeks of entries. The pattern was undeniable. Progressive disengagement, nightly river reconnaissance, active choice to ignore infant distress. This wasn't neglect anymore. Neglect is passive forgetting, failing to notice. This was active choice, deliberate blocking of a baby's cries, precision surveillance of water access points. I had the evidence, but I needed to know, When does a father stop being a father and become a threat? What's the legal threshold? What can I do without destroying my son's life? And what do I do if destroying it is the only way to save my grandson? I knew exactly who to call. I closed the notebook and pulled my phone from the desk drawer. Graham Whitaker's number was still saved from the last job we worked together 15 years ago. My thumb hovered over his name for a long moment, because once I made this call, once I brought law enforcement into my son's life, there was no walking it back. But Silas's hoarse crying still echoed in my head. I pressed call at 9:30 on a Tuesday morning, sitting in my truck in the Kroger parking lot, so Julian wouldn't hear the conversation. July 8th, I'd told him I was running to the store for groceries. Instead, I sat in my truck with 3 weeks of documentation open on my lap, and my phone pressed to my ear listening to it ring. 3 rings, then a voice I hadn't heard in 15 years. Whitaker. Graham, it's Otis Howard. I need your professional opinion on something. Silence for 2 seconds, then, Otis, Jesus, how long's it been 15 years? You only call when it's bad. It's bad, and it's about my son. Graham Whitaker, 51 years old and 15 years into his career with Marietta PD, had worked security details with me, back when we were both younger men who thought we'd seen everything. He'd moved to law enforcement after our last job together. I'd retired, but the professional shorthand between us hadn't faded. Tell me, he said, no preamble, no small talk, just the opening for my briefing. I laid it out systematically. Julian's arrival on June 7th with week-old Silas. The first week of devoted care that made me believe recovery was possible. Then week 2, the missed feedings, the withdrawal, the progressive disengagement. Week 3, the nightly river visits at precisely 2:15 a.m. for 7 consecutive nights. The headphones incident on July 5th with Silas crying for hours, while Julian sat 3 feet away deliberately blocking it out. Graham listened without interrupting. Old investigators' courtesy let the witness finish before asking questions. When I stopped, he was quiet for a moment. Has he physically harmed the child? No, threatened harm verbally. Not directly. He barely speaks to Silas at all anymore. Any evidence of starvation, dehydration, untreated medical needs? No, but that's because I'm handling all the care. I'm doing everything, every feeding, every change, every night. The river visits, has he taken the baby near the water? Not that I've seen. He goes alone. Every night, same time, same spot. Stands there for 55 minutes exactly, then comes back. And you're certain about the timing? I've documented 7 consecutive nights. It's not grief, Graham. Grief doesn't run on a stopwatch. Another pause. I hear what you're saying, Otis, but I need you to hear what I'm about to tell you. The dread in my chest crystallized into something cold and heavy. What you're describing isn't enough for CPS to remove a child from a parent. You need concrete evidence of immediate physical endangerment. But he's completely detached. He ignores his son for hours. That's not enough. Not legally, not yet. Severe apathy and emotional withdrawal are concerning, but they don't meet emergency removal threshold. The river visits are disturbing, but there's no law against standing at a riverbank. The headphones incident shows poor judgment, but the baby ultimately wasn't harmed and you were present, which means he wasn't left unsupervised. So, what you're telling me is, I need to wait until something actually happens. Until there's physical harm? I'm telling you, the legal standard requires concrete proof of immediate physical endangerment, active abuse, documented plan to harm, life-threatening neglect. What you've got is alarming behavior patterns, but it's circumstantial. How much evidence does a grandfather need to prove his grandson is in danger? A bruise, a burn, or a body? Graham, my instincts are screaming that something terrible is coming. I trust your instincts, Otis. You were the best investigator I ever worked with. If you say something's wrong, something is wrong. But instinct isn't evidence. Not in family court. Not with CPS. I sat there in my truck, watching a mother load groceries into her car, while her toddler sat in the cart eating a cookie. Normal life. The kind of normal that should have been Silas's reality. Here's what else I need you to understand, Graham continued. You being there handling all the care, you're the child's safety net right now. You're preventing harm. That actually works against emergency intervention protocols. The system sees a baby being adequately cared for by a grandfather in the home. There's no crisis from their perspective. So I'm protecting him too well. You're protecting him, period, which is what matters. But yes, it means the state doesn't see an emergency. What do? Keep documenting everything. Times, dates, specific behaviors. If he makes a direct threat, any verbal indication of intent to harm you, call me immediately. If he physically touches the child in any way that leaves a mark, you photograph it and call me. If the situation escalates beyond emotional neglect into active endangerment, I can move fast. But I need something concrete. How much time do I have to get you what you need? I don't know, but don't wait too long. I closed my eyes and thought about Julian standing at the water's edge every night staring at the same spot, measuring something, planning something. 48 hours, I said. I'll give it 48 more hours of intensive observation. If I don't have concrete evidence by then, I starve, that trompe is spied. And if something happens in those 48 hours, then it'll be on me, but I have to be certain before I destroy my son's life. Otis. Graham said, his voice softer now. You're not destroying his life. You're trying to save your grandson's. There's a difference. From where I'm sitting, it feels like the same thing. I know, but when you get that evidence, and you will, if it's really happening, you call me, day or night. I'll move as fast as the system allows. That might not be fast enough. I know, he said quietly, but it's what we've got. We said goodbye, and I sat there with the phone in my hand staring at my notebook. I was betting my grandson's life on 48 hours and my ability to document the undocumentable of father's absence of love. Graham was right. I needed concrete evidence, not gut feelings. But my gut was screaming that 48 hours might be exactly 48 hours too long. I started the truck and headed home, not knowing that the evidence I needed was already taking shape under Julian's bed. 2 nights after my call with Graham, I heard Julian's bedroom door close at 2:14 a.m. 1 minute early and knew I had exactly 55 minutes to find what I needed. July 10th. I'd been waiting for this, lying awake in the dark listening. The moment I heard him leave through the back door toward the river, I rose and moved down the hallway. I'd done hundreds of silent entries over 28 years. Muscle memory took over, test the doorknob, slowly apply pressure at the top, hinge to prevent creaking slip inside, and close it behind me with one smooth motion. Julian's room looked normal in the pale moonlight through the window. Bed neatly made, clothes folded, desk organized. I started with the closet. That's where I found the wedding portrait on the floor behind a stack of boxes. It wasn't casually torn, it was violently destroyed. Evelyn's face had been precisely cut out and replaced with handwritten words in red marker. The mistake. The anchor. Why I'm trapped. But that wasn't the worst part. In the background of the photo, barely visible, was newborn Silas in his hospital bassinet. Julian had drawn over my grandson's face. A crude circle in red marker, like marking a target. The cuts were surgical, precise. This wasn't rage, it was deliberate. I pulled out my phone and photographed it, making sure the flash didn't show through the window. Wide shot showing context. Close-up of the words. Close-up of the circle over Silas. My hands shook, but I kept them steady enough. Evidence had to be clear, admissible, undeniable. I placed the portrait back exactly where I'd found it and moved to the desk. 3 drawers, first 2 opened easily. Close old paperwork, nothing useful. The bottom drawer was locked. I'd taught Julian to pick locks when he was 16. Now, I used the same skills against him. 30 seconds with a paperclip and the drawer slid open. Inside was a journal, black cover spiral bound about 100 pages. I'd expected an emotional diary grief over Evelyn leaving confusion about fatherhood, maybe even suicidal ideation I'd have to report. What I found was worse. The journal wasn't emotional processing. It was a planning document. Itemized chronological list starting June 7th, the day Julian arrived. He labeled Silas' root structural problem in the first entry. Not my son, not the baby structural problem. Next page, debt source with the mortgage fraud amount written in capitals. $145,000. Page after page of observations. Silas's sleep schedules, my absence windows, feeding times, when the house was quietest. Then the calculations started. Ohio River depth measurements at various points. Current speed estimates. Water temperature by month. Survivability timelines for infant submersion. There's a specific kind of horror that comes from reading your own son's plan to murder your grandson, written in handwriting you taught him in 2nd grade. I kept reading. Had to document every page. The handwriting deteriorated as the entries progressed. Early pages were controlled, methodical. Later pages grew increasingly frantic letters, larger sentences fragment. Editor, July 3rd solution in capitals underlined 3 times. July 6th necessary action written over and over filling half a page. July 8th, river depth calculations repeated with different variables. Weight of basket foam, displacement time until hypothermia. July 9th yesterday, the last entry. Time running short, father suspicious. Must act soon. I checked my watch, 2:42 a.m., 13 minutes gone, 42 remaining. I photographed every page, 63 in total, fighting the trembling in my hands to keep each image clear, wide shots showing the full pages, close-ups of specific entries, sequential page numbers visible in each frame. This was what Graham needed. Concrete evidence, not just disturbing behavior documented planning, targeting, ideation with method and timeline. I replaced the journal exactly as I'd found it, relocked the drawer, stood and surveyed the room one last time to ensure nothing was out of place. Through the window I could see the tree line, no movement yet. Julian was still at the river. I slipped out of the room, closed the door silently and retreated to the kitchen. 3:08 a.m. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark and sent the encrypted photo file to Graham with a message, found this in Jay's room. Planning documentation, calculations for river. Last entry says, must act soon. Then I waited, phone on the table, watching the screen, watching the clock. 3:17 a.m. The phone vibrated. Graham's voice was tight with professional urgency. I've seen a lot of threat assessment docs, Otis. This one's clear he's planning something specific. You've got evidence of ideation planning targeting. Combined with your behavioral documentation, this meets threshold. When do we move? When he does, not before. We need him to commit to the action attempt preparation movement toward the victim. If we move too early with just the journal, his lawyer argues it's fantasy, not intent. We need the overt act. So I wait for him to try. You'll know the moment. Trust your gut. When you see him moving on the child, you call me immediately. I'll have units staged nearby starting tomorrow. Response time under 3 minutes. What if I'm not fast enough? You will be. You've been ready for this your whole career. You just never thought it would be your own son. I heard it then, the back door opening downstairs. He's back, I whispered. Let's stay on task. Document everything. Call me the moment he moves. We move when he moves, which meant I had to wait for my son to try to kill my grandson before I could stop him. I hung up as Julian's silhouette appeared in the kitchen doorway at 3:27 a.m., exactly on schedule from his river visit. He walked past me in the dark without acknowledging I was there, climbed the stairs to his room. I sat frozen in the kitchen chair phone, with 63 pages of evidence still warm in my hand. The journal said, must act soon. The question was whether soon meant tomorrow, next week, or the next time he walked to that river at 2:15 a.m. At 8 o'clock the next morning, I had Dr. Ramsey's number on my phone screen and my finger on the call button when I heard Julian's footsteps on the stairs. July 11th. I'd been sitting at the kitchen table for an hour staring at that contact entry. Dr. Celeste Ramsey, court-appointed psychiatrist for emergency mental health evaluations. One call and they'd assess him, remove him if necessary. Silas would be safe. But Graham's words echoed, we move when he moves. Wait for the trigger. Don't act too early. The journal said, must act soon, written yesterday. How soon was soon? My coffee had gone cold. I hadn't slept since finding the journal. Exhaustion pulled at my edges, but professional discipline held me steady. 28 years of security work came down to knowing when to watch and when to strike. The footsteps descended slowly, deliberately. I looked up. Julian appeared in the doorway, carrying Silas against his chest. My grandson was content cooing softly, but it was Julian who stopped me cold. He was freshly showered, clean shave, hair combed for the first time in weeks, pressed shirt, one I hadn't seen him wear since he arrived. He looked like he'd looked during that first hopeful week before everything collapsed. He was smiling. Good morning, Dad. I set my phone down carefully, screen going dark, Dr. Ramsey's number disappearing. Morning. Julian moved to the counter and began making a bottle with practiced efficiency, the efficiency I hadn't seen in a month. He kept Silas balanced against one shoulder, talking to him gently. I think I'm over the hump. I've been a mess, I know, but something clicked last night. Just lying there, thinking about everything, about how patient you've been, how much Silas needs me to be better. He tested the bottle temperature on his wrist like any competent father would. I want to make things right for Silas, for you. I've been drowning, but I think I'm finally coming up for air. The performance was flawless. Voice steady, eye contact appropriate, body language open and engaged. If I hadn't read his journal 6 hours ago, I might have believed him. That's really good to hear, son. Julian fed Silas the bottle, watching him with what looked like genuine tenderness. You've been so patient with me, Dad. I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful. And look at him, he's smiling at me. I forgot what that felt like. Silas was smiling, content in his father's arms, drinking his bottle. Any observer would see a father bonding with his child. Recovery in progress. Crisis past. How do you tell if recovery is real, or if you're watching a man rehearse his alibi? I'd seen this before. 28 years investigating threats, pre-attack normalization. The pattern where subjects appear calm, recovered cooperative immediately before executing violent plans, creates plausible deniability, lowers everyone's guard, makes the coming violence even more shocking, because how could someone who seemed so stable just hours before do something so terrible? The timing was too perfect. Julian's sudden transformation occurred the exact morning I'd prepared to call for emergency intervention. After 6 weeks of progressive deterioration, after abandoning his son completely after writing, Must Act Soon. In a journal filled with murder planning, he wakes up recovered. Number. This was tactical. He knew I was watching. The journal said, Father suspicious. He'd adapted his strategy. If I was documenting his neglect and withdrawal, he'd show me engagement and recovery. Make my evidence look like overreaction. Make any intervention I tried look like a paranoid grandfather persecuting a struggling father. I watched him burp Silas gently, the picture of attentive fatherhood. I'm thinking about looking for work next week, he said conversationally. Remote stuff maybe, so I can be here with him during the day. Be the dad he deserves. That sounds like a good plan. My notebook sat open on the counter. I'd left it there when I got my coffee. The current page showed Julian's river visit timing patterns 7 consecutive nights, 2:15 a.m., departure, 3:10 a.m. return. Julian's eyes found it, just for a second, a flicker of awareness, then back to Silas. But I saw. The micro-expression lasted maybe half a second, eyes to notebook, recognition, calculation, then deliberate casual redirection like he hadn't noticed it at all. He knew I was documenting him, knew I was tracking his movements, knew the surveillance was active and detailed, which meant the performance I was watching was specifically designed to counter what I'd been recording. I'm proud of you for working through this, I said, keeping my voice warm, playing my role as well as he was playing his. Julian looked up and smiled. Thanks, Dad. I know I put you through hell this past month. I'm sorry. I really am. We all struggle sometimes. What matters is getting through it. We were both pretending now, both playing roles, both waiting for the other to break. The hunter knew he was being hunted, which meant everything was about to accelerate. Julian finished feeding Silas and took him to the living room. I heard him talking to the baby, soft words I couldn't make out, normal father sounds. Therapeutic engagement. I picked up my phone, put it in my pocket, didn't call Dr. Ramsey. Graham was right. We moved when Julian moved, not before, and Julian would move. The journal made that clear. But now I knew he'd move differently than he'd originally planned. He'd adapt to the surveillance, change tactics, maybe change timing, which meant I had to watch even more carefully. The notebook stayed on the counter where I'd left it. Open to that page, visible, deliberate. If Julian wanted to know what I knew, I'd let him see just enough to keep him guessing. Let him think my surveillance was limited to his river visits. Let him believe I was tracking behavior, but not intent. But the journal I'd photographed last night, the 63 pages of planning and calculations, and Must Act Soon. That evidence was already with Graham, already documented, already beyond Julian's reach, already building the legal case we'd need when he finally made his move. He could perform all he wanted. He could smile and engage and play devoted father as convincingly as any actor. My older sister Ruth arrived that Saturday afternoon carrying homemade oatmeal cookies and wearing the kind of determined cheerfulness that told me she'd come to prove I was overreacting. July 15th, 4 days after I'd found the journal, 4 days of watching Julian perform his recovery while I waited for him to make his move. Ruth, 75 years old with 30 years of school library experience behind her, had that particular brand of elderly certainty that she knew better than everyone else about everything. She'd called 2 days earlier, asking how Julian was doing, and I'd been vague enough that she'd decided to see for herself. "Otis," she said, brightly kissing my cheek and pushing past me into the house. "I brought cookies. Where's my boy?" She found him in the living room. Julian was on the floor with Silas making the baby laugh with peekaboo. He looked up when Ruth entered his face, lighting up with what seemed like genuine pleasure. "Aunt Ruth." He stood and hugged her, careful not to jostle Silas in his other arm, the picture of a devoted young father. Ruth's face softened immediately. "Julian, sweetheart, it's so good to see you taking care of this beautiful boy. Otis had me worried, but look at you. You're doing wonderfully." Julian smiled, warm, appropriate, perfectly calibrated. "I've had some rough days, but I'm getting there. Dad's been incredibly patient with me. See, Dad, Aunt Ruth gets it. I'm doing better every day." Ruth beamed at him. Then she turned to me with an expression that said, "I told you so," louder than words. "Otis, he looks wonderful. You were worried about nothing." I watched Julian play with Silas for another 15 minutes. The performance was flawless. He made airplane sounds. He sang a nursery rhyme I'd taught him when he was 3. He checked Silas's diaper and changed it efficiently when it needed changing. Ruth watched with visible approval, occasionally glancing at me as if to say, "See." At 2:20, Julian announced Silas needed a nap and carried the baby upstairs with exaggerated tenderness. Ruth watched him go, then turned to me. "That's a good father right there. You should be proud, not paranoid." Once Julian's bedroom door closed upstairs, my expression shifted. "Ruth, we need to talk about what's really happening here." Her face hardened immediately. "I know that tone. You're about to tell me I'm wrong about my own nephew, the nephew I helped raise while you were traveling for work. Just look at what I'm about to show you, then judge." I pulled out my phone. "Don't start with me, Otis. He's grieving his marriage. Men process differently. Give him space and patience, not surveillance." "Ruth, look." I opened the photo gallery and handed her the phone. The first image was the shredded wedding portrait, Evelyn's face cut out precisely. The words written in red marker, "The mistake, the anchor, why I'm trapped." Ruth's smile faded. "He's angry at Evelyn, not the baby. It's therapeutic. Swipe to the next photo." She did. The close-up of Silas in the background with the crude circle drawn over his face. Ruth went quiet. "Keep going," I said gently. The journal pages began. I'd sent myself the clearest shots, the ones where Julian's handwriting was most legible. Structural problem requiring permanent solution. Ruth scrolled slowly. Her defenses were still up, but weakening with each image. Debt source, obstacle to freedom, river depth calculations. How do you tell someone that the nephew they have loved for 25 years is planning to murder his own child? She kept scrolling. The images showed the progression of Julian's deteriorating handwriting, the increasing frequency of the word solution, the technical calculations about water temperature and infant survival rates. I watched her face. The cheerful certainty was gone. She looked older now, the lines around her mouth deeper. People write things they don't mean when they're upset. It's just venting. Oiji rindond stust. "Ruth, read the last entry, the one dated 3 days ago." She found it. I watched her eyes move across the screen. "Time running short. Father suspicious. Must act soon." "Oh God." Her hand trembled holding the phone. "Otis, I don't..." She scrolled back through the images, looking at them again, trying to find an explanation that would make this something other than what it clearly was. There wasn't one. She handed the phone back to me without speaking. Her face had gone pale, the color draining from her cheeks. She looked like she'd aged 10 years and 10 minutes. Ruth stood mechanically reaching for her purse and the container of cookies she'd brought. The cookies she'd baked thinking she'd be celebrating Julian's recovery. "Do you understand what I'm showing you?" I asked quietly. "Do you see the danger?" She nodded once, slow, heavy, but no words came out. "Ruth, I need to go home. I need to think." She walked to the front door, had to pass Julian's closed bedroom to get there, the room where he was supposedly putting Silas down for a nap. Her body language changed as she passed that door. Her hand white-knuckled the purse strap. Her shoulders drew up. She moved faster like something was chasing her. She didn't call goodbye to Julian, didn't ask to see Silas one more time before leaving, didn't suggest we all have cookies together when the baby woke up. Just walked out the door and down the front steps to her car. I followed her outside. "Ruth." She turned at her car door. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. Nothing came out. Sometimes the truth is so heavy you can't lift it with words, only carry it in your bones and your silence. She got in her car and drove away. I stood on the porch watching her taillights disappear down the street, knowing I'd just shown my 75-year-old sister evidence that her nephew was planning infanticide. She hadn't said a word in agreement, but she also hadn't said goodbye to Julian, hadn't kissed Silas before leaving, hadn't looked back at the house. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any verdict. 5 days after Ruth walked out of my house without saying goodbye to Julian, I decided to stop watching and start asking. July 20th. 5 days of tension so thick I could barely breathe. 5 days of Julian performing recovery while I documented behaviors that yielded nothing new. 5 days of waiting for him to make a move that Graham could intercept. I couldn't wait anymore. At 8 a.m., I sat across from Julian at the kitchen table, both of us with coffee. Silas asleep upstairs. The morning light coming through the window made everything look deceptively normal. "We need to talk about something, Julian, just you and me." He looked up from his coffee. His eyes sharpened that prey animal alertness I'd been seeing more and more often. "Okay, what's going on?" I was about to break the cardinal rule of investigation. Never confront the suspect directly before you have a complete case. Never tip your hand. Never give them a chance to adapt or flee or lawyer up. But I wasn't an investigator anymore. I was a grandfather watching my son circle his infant like a predator, and I'd run out of professional patience. "I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need you to give me an honest answer." Julian set his coffee down slowly. His posture changed, shoulders back, spine straight. Defensive readiness. "All right." I looked him in the eyes. My son. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike. The teenager I'd helped through his mother's death. The man who'd become a stranger. "Have you had thoughts of hurting Silas?" The silence that followed was suffocating. 15 seconds. I counted them. Watched Julian's face cycle through micro-expressions I'd been trained to read for 3 decades. First surprise, genuine shock that I'd asked it so directly. Then calculation, strategic thinking, weighing options, selecting a response. Then defensive anger, the face you make when you're preparing to counterattack. Not shocked denial, not confused hurt, not the immediate visceral no of an innocent man wrongly accused. Just calculation. 15 seconds of silence can feel like drowning when the answer could save or condemn your grandson's life. "Are you serious right now?" He answered my question with a question. Classic interrogation evasion. I'd seen it 1,000 times. "I didn't ask if you're his father. I asked if you've had thoughts of hurting him." "Are you losing your mind, Dad? I'm his father." There it was, the tell. He appealed to relationship status. I'm his father, not to facts. He didn't say no. He didn't say never. He didn't say, "Of course not. How could you think that I love him more than anything?" He deflected. He questioned my sanity. He stated his biological relationship as if that was an answer. His body language closed, arms crossed, leaning back, jaw set, defensive posture, not wounded innocence. His voice had that sharp edge of anger, the anger of someone caught without a prepared alibi, not the hurt of someone falsely accused. I'd interviewed threats for 30 years. I knew what guilty looked like. This was it. "Julian, I can't believe this is insane. I'm going upstairs." He stood abruptly, chair scraping loud against the floor. That wasn't a denial. He froze at the doorway, turned back to look at me, and for just a second the mask dropped completely. I saw what was underneath. Cold, empty, not my son at all. Then he turned and walked away. Up the stairs, down the hallway. His bedroom door slammed hard enough to rattle the house. Silas started crying immediately. I sat alone at the kitchen table, listening to my grandson scream and my son's footsteps pacing above me, back and forth, like a caged animal deciding whether to settle or attack. I pulled out my phone and called Graham. He answered on the second ring. "Otis." I confronted him directly, asked him point blank if he'd had thoughts of hurting Silas. And he didn't deny it, Graham. 30 years of interrogations and I know what evasion looks like. He answered with a question, deflected to relationship status, got defensive and angry instead of shocked and hurt. It's there. The intent is there. Graham was quiet for a moment. That changes the timeline. "I know. How fast can you mobilize when I call? 10 minutes to your location, maybe less. We've got units briefed and staged. 1 word from you and we move." Then we wait, but not long. I just lit the fuse. "Otis, you did the right thing. Sometimes you have to force the issue, but watch him. every second. If he so much as looks at that baby wrong, you call me. I will. And Otis, keep your phone on you. Don't let it out of your sight. Don't let him get between you and it. Understood. I hung up and looked at the ceiling. Julian's pacing had stopped. Now there was just silence, punctuated by Silas's crying. The confrontation had changed everything. Before I was watching a potential threat. Now I'd told him I knew. He had maybe 48 hours before I'd have no choice but to force intervention, whether I had perfect evidence or not. The question was what he'd do with those 48 hours. Would he abandon the plan, knowing he'd been caught, pack up and leave, in the night disappear like Evelyn had? Or would the confrontation accelerate his timeline, push him to act before I could move against him? I just told my son I knew he wanted to kill his child, and instead of proving me wrong, he'd proven me right. Upstairs, Silas's crying intensified. I heard Julian's door open, footsteps to the nursery, then silence as he picked up the baby. I stood and moved quietly to the bottom of the stairs, listening. Julian was singing, the same lullaby from those first hopeful days. His voice was soft, appropriate, fatherly. But I knew better now. Performance wasn't evidence of safety, it was evidence of planning. Graham's call came 5 days after I confronted Julian, and the first words out of his mouth changed everything I thought I understood about my son's breakdown. We found her in Nevada. July 25th. I'd been sitting at the kitchen table watching Julian through the window. He stood at the river's edge, same spot as always, same frozen posture, same timing. 2:15 in the afternoon now, instead of morning, but the ritual hadn't stopped just because I'd called him out. And Otis, what we found with her, there's a prior victim. Same playbook word for word. I sat up straighter. Explain. Federal agents tracked her through financial records, found documentation of at least one other male victim, rapid courtship, marriage within months, mortgage fraud using forged documents on family property, total disappearance with funds, victim left with massive debt and an infant. The words hit me like physical blows. Identical. To the letter. FBI suspects she's part of an organized ring, but they can't confirm yet. What they can confirm is that Evelyn Mercer isn't her real name. It's an alias, one of several. How many others? At least one documented. They suspect more but haven't connected the dots yet. Point is, Otis, your son, wasn't just abandoned. He was hunted. I watched Julian through the window. He hadn't moved in 5 minutes, just stared at the water like it held answers. Professional operation. As professional as they come. She didn't panic or make mistakes. She executed a plan she'd executed before. Julian was selected, groomed, and systematically exploited, then discarded. So, his breakdown makes sense, doesn't it? If you're deliberately demolished by a professional predator versus organically falling apart from stress. The speed and severity of his psychological collapse isn't random. It's the result of calculated trauma. I close my eyes. He's a victim. He is. But it doesn't change what he's planning to do. Silence on Graham's end. No, he said finally. It doesn't. We hung up, and I sat there processing. Understanding arrived in waves. Julian was a genuine victim of sophisticated crime. Being targeted by a calculated predator explained the severity of his fracture, the speed of his deterioration, the completeness of his collapse. He wasn't weak. He was professionally demolished. At what point does a victim become a perpetrator? When they're hurt, or when they choose to hurt someone innocent in return? But I recognize the critical truth, even as pity welled up in my chest. Being a victim doesn't erase being a threat. Understanding the cause doesn't reduce the danger to Silas. Pity for Julian's suffering can't override my protective duty to an innocent grandson. I could hold both truths simultaneously. Julian was destroyed by a predator, and Julian was now planning to destroy his own child. Both things could be true. That evening I did something I'd been avoiding. I audited the phone account records. I was the account holder. Julian was on my family plan, so it was legal, but it felt like another invasion, another betrayal. I needed to know. The call log told a story I hadn't expected. 3 outgoing calls to numbers associated with Evelyn over the past 3 weeks, all rejected or showing as disconnected. 7 text message attempts to various numbers, all marked undelivered. The pattern showed escalating desperation, not reconciliation attempts. Julian wasn't trying to get her back. He wasn't seeking return of stolen funds. He wasn't attempting relationship repair. The timestamps revealed the truth. Every call made at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. after his river visits. He'd go to the water at 2:15, stand there for 55 minutes, return to the house, and immediately try to contact the woman who destroyed him. Like he was seeking answers. Like the river vigil was him trying to understand, and the calls were his attempt to ask. I scrolled to the most recent entry. July 26th, 3:17 a.m., text message, one recipient number showing as disconnected. I clicked to view the message content. One word. Why? That was it. No elaboration, no context, just that single question mark hanging in digital space sent to a disconnected number, never received, never read, never answered. Julian's last coherent piece of humanity, reaching through his fractured mind, seeking comprehension of what had been done to him. Why did you select me? Why did you marry me? Why did you make me love you? Why did you destroy everything? Why did you leave me with a child, an impossible debt, and a mind that doesn't work right anymore? Why? Evelyn would never see it. The number was disconnected. She'd moved on to her next victim or disappeared into whatever network protected her. His question floated in the void, unanswered and unanswerable. I stared at that word on my screen and felt something crack in my chest. My son wasn't a monster. He was a drowning man who'd forgotten how to scream for help. A victim who'd become a danger. A destroyed human being asking the most fundamental question, why was I hurt? And getting only silence in return. Understanding why someone is dangerous doesn't make them less dangerous. It just makes stopping them hurt more. He'd sent that text 2 nights ago, at 3:17 in the morning, right after his river visit, while I'd been lying awake in my room, listening to him pace documenting his patterns. He'd been reaching out to the person who destroyed him, asking a question she'd never answer. And tomorrow, he'd do it again. Walk to the river, stand there trying to understand. Come back and maybe send another hopeless message into the void. I couldn't save him from what Evelyn had done. I couldn't give him the answer he desperately needed. I couldn't undo the professional demolition of his psyche. But I could save Silas from what Julian was about to do. Heartbreak doesn't change math. Pity doesn't override duty. Understanding the why doesn't eliminate the what. I closed the phone records and sat in the dark study that single word, why, burned into my mind. Julian was both victim and threat-destroyed man, an active danger drowning and pulling others under simultaneously. Graham had found the woman who broke him, but finding her didn't fix what she'd broken. And tomorrow morning, Julian would wake up and walk to that river again at 2:15 a.m., and I'd have to decide how much longer I could watch before I had to act. Robert from next door caught me by the fence line on a Tuesday morning, wanting to chat about his tomatoes, and ended up confirming my worst nightmare. August 2nd, I was checking the sprinkler system when I heard him call over. Otis, got a minute? Robert, my next-door neighbor of 15 years and a retired postal worker who kept meticulous watch over the neighborhood from his upstairs insomnia window, had no idea what he was about to confirm. I walked to the fence line. He was holding a basket of early tomatoes, smiling in that friendly way that meant he wanted to talk about nothing in particular. These early girls are doing great this year. Want some? Sure, thanks. He handed a few over the fence and launched into his usual commentary about soil, pH, and watering schedules. I nodded along, half listening, thinking about Julian upstairs with Silas. Then Robert said it casually, like commenting on the weather. Your son goes down to the river sometimes at night. I see him from my upstairs window when I can't sleep. Must help him think, I guess. My blood went cold, but I kept my face neutral. Yeah, he likes the quiet. Last week, maybe Tuesday, I saw him carrying the baby. Figured he was walking him to sleep. You know how babies are. About 3 a.m., the world tilted. Walking him, down toward the river path. Gone maybe 20 minutes, came back. Baby must have settled down after that. Smart thinking, actually, fresh air works wonders. Robert kept talking about his grandson's sleep problems, oblivious to the fact that he'd just told me Julian had already taken Silas to the river, already tested the approach, already rehearsed. Well, tomatoes are looking good this year, Robert continued. Let me know if you want more when they ripen. Will do. Thanks, Robert. I walked back to the house with a tomato in each hand and my heart trying to punch through my ribs. Inside, I set the tomatoes on the counter and gripped the edge of the sink. Julian had already taken Silas to the river, last Tuesday, 3 a.m. The timing matched his nightly pattern perfectly. This wasn't theoretical planning anymore. This was active rehearsal. Or worse, thought an aborted first attempt. Maybe he'd stood there with Silas in his arms and couldn't go through with it. Maybe he'd walked to the edge, looked at the dark water, and his courage had failed. Or maybe he'd decided he needed better equipment first. Better staging, better conditions. How close had we already come to losing Silas without me even knowing? How many times had Julian stood at that river's edge with my grandson in his arms? I pulled out my phone and texted Graham neighbor, witnessed Jay taking baby to river 3 a.m. last week. Not planning, rehearsing. Need to locate staging equipment now. Graham's response came in 30 seconds. That's your threshold. Find the equipment. Document everything. When you're ready, we move. I knew what I was looking for. The specialized waterproof travel basket we'd bought when Silas was born. Heavy-duty foam construction designed to keep babies safe and dry during transport. Ironically perfect for staging a water accident. I went to the storage closet where we kept baby gear, sorted through strollers, car seats, extra bottles. No basket. Checked the garage, the basement, the mudroom. Nothing. Before I show you what I found under his bed, are you still with me? Comment A if you think I should have called authorities immediately. Or B, if you'd wait for more evidence, add Y in 5 words. This next part contains some recreated details for storytelling impact. The lesson is what matters most. What? 2 o'clock that afternoon, while Julian was out running errands and Silas napped in my room, I went into Julian's bedroom. I'd avoided searching his space directly. Some paternal instinct said crossing that threshold was a betrayal I couldn't take back. But Robert's revelation had changed the math. Julian wasn't preparing anymore. He was executing. I started with the closet. Nothing unusual. Moved to the desk drawers, already knew about the journal. Checked under the mattress. Then I looked under the bed. There it was. Wrapped in a black plastic garbage bag. Deliberately concealed. The waterproof basket. I pulled it out carefully, unwrapped enough to confirm what it was. Then took photos from multiple angles. Wide shot showing position under bed. Close-up of the basket. The serial number on the bottom. The black plastic wrapping. Evidence, concrete, undeniable. The basket was staged, ready for deployment. All Julian needed was the right moment. I rewrapped it exactly as I'd found it, slid it back under the bed to the precise position, left no trace I'd been there. Confiscating it would alert him that I'd discovered his plan. He'd adapt, change tactics, maybe accelerate the timeline in panic. No, better to leave everything in place. Let him think he was still undetected. Catch him in the act with all evidence intact. I sent the photos to Graham with a message found staging equipment, under his bed, wrapped and ready, leaving in place to avoid alerting him. Graham called immediately. That's it. That's your proof of imminent action. I know. We're authorized to move whenever you say the word. What's your response time? 10 minutes to your location, maybe less. I've got a tactical unit briefed and positioned. We can be on your street before he makes it to the riverbank. It could be tonight, Graham. He's got everything staged. He's already rehearsed it. There's nothing left to prepare. Then I'm ready. We're all ready. The moment you call, we roll. No hesitation. There's a difference between being ready and being fast enough. I was about to find out which one I really was. Understood. Otis, one more thing. Once we move, once we intercept, there's no taking it back. He'll know you called us. The relationship you had with your son ends the moment my units arrive. That relationship ended when he decided to kill his child. I'm just making it official. We hung up, and I sat in my truck outside the house engine, off watching the upstairs windows. Julian's light was on. Silas's room was dark, still napping. The basket was under his bed. Robert had seen him carry Silas to the river already. Graham's tactical team was positioned and ready to roll. Every piece was in place. Now, I just had to wait for Julian to make his move and pray I was fast enough to stop him. 3 days after finding the basket, Ruth appeared at my door at dawn without calling first. August 5th. I'd spent those 3 days in tactical limbo, watching waiting, sleeping in 2-hour increments with my phone on my chest. Julian maintained his pattern. River visits at 2:15 a.m., perfect father performance during daylight. The basket stayed under his bed. Everything poised on the edge of action. Ruth knocked at 6:30 in the morning. When I opened the door, she wasn't wearing the defensive certainty she'd carried last time. Her face was set in a way I recognized from when we buried her husband, determined grief that had made a decision. We need to talk. No more protecting me. I let her in. She walked straight to the kitchen table and sat like she was bracing for impact. Nothing about Julian has been easy since he turned 14. Show me. I pulled out my phone and laptop. 6 weeks of documentation. I'd organized it chronologically like an investigation file because that's what it was. Surveillance photos showing Julian at the river at 3 a.m. measuring distances with his feet. Video clips I'd taken from my bedroom window of him testing the basement lock on July 28th. Audio recordings of our confrontations, his evasive non-denials, his defensive anger, the timeline of escalating boundary violations, the neighbor's testimony about seeing him carry Silas to the river, the photos of the stage basket under his bed. Ruth watched it all in silence. No questions, no interruptions. Just absorbed every piece of evidence like she was building a case against herself for not seeing it sooner. When I played the audio from July 20th, when I'd asked him directly if he'd had thoughts of hurting Silas and he'd deflected instead of denied her, hands gripped the edge of the table. When I finished, she sat very still for a long time. Then she spoke. "You are his father, but you are also Silas's grandfather." Her voice was steady, clear, like she'd been practicing this speech in her head for 3 weeks. Do not abandon the boy who hasn't taken his first step to chase a man who threw himself into darkness. The words hit me like absolution I didn't know I needed. I didn't know if you'd understand. I understand that my son is gone, and my grandson needs someone who sees clearly. She stood up, gathered her purse. "You do what you have to do, whatever that means. I won't fight you. I won't defend him. I won't stand in your way." She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the knob. "He's not the boy I raised anymore. Save the child who can still be saved." Then she left. I stood there in my kitchen, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks: validation. Ruth had given me permission to do what I'd been agonizing over. Not just permission, a directive. That evening, August 8th, I called Graham. "I need you to review the complete evidence package one more time. Tell me if I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing." "Send it over." I transmitted everything. He called back 30 minutes later. 6 documented trespass incidents, 4 explicit threats during confrontations, systematic surveillance of entry points, multiple rehearsals of approach routes, staged equipment ready for deployment. This isn't mental health crisis anymore, Otis. It's tactical preparation. So I'm not overreacting. You're underreacting. Most civilians wouldn't recognize what you've documented. He's studying that house like a target package. The nightly river visits, that's reconnaissance. The basket staging pre-positioning assets. The baby carry rehearsal your neighbor witnessed operational timing test. When he moves, not if, when. And when he does, you won't have time to call 911. You'll have 90 seconds from first movement to critical action. Maybe less. What do I do? When he comes, and he will come, you protect that child first. Questions come later. Hesitation kills. You know that. Graham didn't say, "Be careful." He said, "Be ready." Late that night, after Julian had completed his 2:15 a.m. river visit and returned to bed, I went to the shed behind the house. I hadn't been in there in months. The door stuck swollen from summer humidity. Inside, under a canvas tarp covered in 3 years of dust, sat my old 14-foot aluminum skiff. I'd bought it in the 90s for river fishing, hadn't used it since retirement, but the river was the one approach vector I couldn't monitor from the house windows. Julian knew that too. He'd been studying it for 6 weeks. If he came by water, I needed to be able to intercept on water. The shed smelled of motor oil and mildew cobwebs thickened the corners, but the skiff's hull was sound. Aluminum doesn't forget, even when men do. I pulled the tarp off completely, checked the fuel tank still half full from whenever I'd used it last. Old gas, but it might work. Found the fuel line, primed it. Positioned myself at the motor, pulled the starter cord. The engine caught on the first pull, rough idle but steady. I let it run for 5 minutes, listening to it smooth out as it warmed. Tested the spotlight mounted on the bow. Battery was dead, but I had a rechargeable one in the garage that would fit. Checked the hull for leaks. Ran my hands along the seams. Everything tight. I killed the engine and stood there in the dark shed with my hand on the motor housing. At 42 years, I wore a badge. Never thought the last call would be my own son. My voice sounded strange in the enclosed space. But Graham's right. When he comes, there won't be time to think, only time to act. I patted the motor once like you'd pat a reliable horse. I'm ready. I left the shed and walked back to the house. Silas was asleep. Julian's light was off. Everything quiet. I lay down in my clothes with my boots by the bed and my phone on my chest. August 9th, 2:47 a.m. The phone vibrated. Text from Graham: motion alert at river access point. Single vehicle. Checking plates now. The August alert turned out to be a false alarm. Someone else's vehicle at the wrong access point. It bought me 2 more months of surveillance. 2 more months of watching Julian circle closer to the decision I knew was coming. October 13th, 2 a.m. Through the night vision monocular Graham had loaned me, I watched my son test 3 different footing positions on the riverbank, his tactical flashlight sweeping the water, like he was planning an amphibious assault. I was hidden in the tree line 40 yards back, dressed in dark clothes, recording everything on my phone. Day 42 of active surveillance. 10 weeks since I'd found the basket under his bed. Julian moved methodically along the shore. He'd cast his light across the current pause step to a new position, test the footing, repeat. He was calculating velocity and approach angles, measuring distances with his feet. I whispered into my phone's voice recorder that subject testing water entry points, behavior consistent with pre-operational site survey. He tested 3 locations before selecting one, the steep drop-off spot 40 yards from the house, the deepest approach, the fastest current, the one that would give him the least time to change his mind. He's not scouting anymore, he's rehearsing. Julian stood at that spot for 5 full minutes staring at the water. Then he turned and walked back to the house. I typed the log entry into my documentation file. Day 42, target conducting, final launch site validation. Intervention mandatory within 24 to 48 hours. This is it, 42 days of surveillance. He's ready to move. The next afternoon, October 14th, Julian appeared at my door unannounced. But he was different. No agitation, no paranoid accusations about me watching him, no defensive anger. He was calm, almost peaceful. "Can I see Silas for a bit?" "Of course, come in." He walked to where Silas was playing on the living room floor with blocks. 10 months old now, pulling himself up on furniture, babbling in sounds that were starting to resemble words. Julian knelt down and watched him. Just watched. His expression was something I couldn't quite read, longing mixed with something else. Something that looked like goodbye. "He's getting so big, 10 months already." "Yeah, growing fast. I'm sorry I haven't been clearer about things. I will be soon." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. This is what it looks like when a son becomes a stranger familiar face, foreign soul. The atmosphere felt surreally normal, like the eye of a hurricane. All that violent energy compressed into artificial calm. He stayed through dinner, first time in months. We sat at the table with Silas in his high chair between us. Casual conversation about nothing important. The weather, the red season, completely mundane. But I read every micro-expression, every pause, every time his eyes found Silas and lingered a second too long. This wasn't the peace of a recovering mind. This was the chilling serenity of a man who has finalized his execution plan. The decision made the tension release, the countdown begun. I'd seen it before. 42 years of watching people before they acted. The suicide who makes all their final phone calls with perfect calm. The domestic abuser who suddenly becomes affectionate the day before. The subject who plans violence and then achieves strange peace once the plan is set. Julian was saying goodbye. "Thanks for dinner, Dad. It's been good to just sit here." "Anytime, son, you know that." "I know. I'm grateful for everything you've done, everything you've tried to do." His word choice was deliberate, past tense. Everything you've done, not everything you're doing. He left at 8 p.m., hugged me at the door, first time since he'd arrived months ago. Then he was gone. I sat at the dining table in the candlelight afterward. Silas had fallen asleep in his bassinet nearby, one tiny hand curled near his face. I thought about the boy Julian had been. Bright, curious, sensitive. The teenager who'd grieved his mother's death so hard I'd worried he'd never recover. The young man who'd been so excited about marrying Evelyn, about becoming a father. Then I thought about the man who'd just left my house. The man who'd spent 2 months studying a river like a tactical target, who'd written "why" in the darkness to a woman who'd never answer, who'd tested footing positions for an operation that would end with his son in cold water. Ruth's words echoed in my head. Do not abandon the boy who hasn't taken his first step to chase a man who threw himself into darkness. How do you stop someone you love from destroying themselves and everyone around them? The choice crystallized with terrible clarity. Love doesn't always mean letting someone do what they intend. Sometimes love means standing in their way. Sometimes it means becoming the wall they break against instead of letting them break someone innocent. I looked at Silas sleeping, 10 months old, completely unaware that his father was planning to kill him, completely trusting that the adults in his world would keep him safe. "I know what you're planning," I said quietly to the empty room. "I saw it in your eyes tonight." Julian had said goodbye without saying the words. The dinner was his last supper. The hug was his final contact. Tomorrow or the next day, or the day after he'd make his move. "You said goodbye without saying the words." I reached over and adjusted Silas's blanket. His breathing was soft and steady. Perfect innocence. "I love you," I whispered, though I wasn't sure anymore if I was talking to my son or my grandson. Maybe both. "I love you. Because of that, I will stop you." October 15th, 4:37 a.m. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. Motion sensor alert. I grabbed it, pulled up the camera feed. Julian was at the river, but this time he wasn't alone. He was carrying something wrapped in dark plastic, the basket, I realized, and he was loading it into a small kayak I'd never seen before. The storm hits Marietta at 11 p.m. on October 15th, exactly when the weather models predicted. I'm lying fully dressed on the floor of Silas's nursery boots-laced go bag within arm's reach, listening to rain hammer the roof like automatic weapons fire. And Julian sleeping, or pretending to sleep, in his bedroom down the hall. I've been in this position for 2 hours. My back aches. My neck is stiff. I don't move. In Afghanistan, I once held a sniper position for 14 hours, waiting for a target to show himself for 3 seconds. Tonight, I'll wait as long as it takes. The motion sensors at the river are armed. The skiff is fueled and secured under a tarp behind the shed. My phone is on silent, but the vibration alert will wake me if I doze. I won't doze. I haven't slept more than 90 minutes at a stretch since Julian moved in. Outside, wind tears at the gutters. Thunder rolls across the Ohio River Valley. The storm forecast calls for 2 to 3 inches of rain before dawn, possible flash flooding winds gusting to 45 miles per hour. Perfect conditions for someone who's been waiting for tactical cover. 11:30 midnight, 12:30. Julian's bedroom door hasn't opened. The house creaks and settles around me. I count my breaths to stay focused, 4 counts in hold for 4 counts out. Combat breathing, the kind that keeps your heart rate under control when everything in your body wants to explode into action. 1 a.m., 1:15, 1:30. Waiting for your sun to strike is like holding your breath underwater. You know, you'll have to surface eventually. You just don't know if you'll make it in time. 1:40. The rain intensifies, drumming harder. 1:50 a.m. Julian's bedroom door creaks. I don't move. I listen. Footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate, trying for silence. But the old floorboards betray him. The footsteps pass the nursery, past the bathroom, head toward the stairs. My phone vibrates against my ribs. Motion sensor alpha, the one I mounted on the oak tree overlooking the river access path. Someone just crossed the infrared beam. I count to 20. Give Julian time to clear the house. Then I move. Rising from the floor makes no sound. I learned to move silently in buildings before Julian learned to walk. The nursery window overlooks the backyard. I ease it open 2 inches and peer through the gap. Lightning flashes. In that half-second of illumination, I see a figure in dark rain gear moving toward the tree line. Julian. He's carrying something, a backpack or maybe a bag. He disappears into the woods. I'm down the stairs in 15 seconds. The back door is unlocked. Julian left it open behind him. Sloppy. Or maybe he doesn't care anymore if I know. I step into the storm. The rain is torrential, visibility maybe 20 feet. I pull up my hood and move toward the tree line, angling to intercept the path to the river. The ground is already saturated, my boots squelching through mud. Thunder cracks so loud it feels like pressure on my eardrums. I reach the tree line and stop. Listen. Nothing but wind and rain and the Ohio River running high and fast, 200 yards downslope. I pull out my night vision monocular and scan the woods. Green-washed darkness. Trees bending in the wind, no movement. Julian's had a 3-minute head start. The path to the river is a 1/4 mile through dense hardwoods. If he's moving fast, he's already there. If he's being careful, he's close. I move down the path at tactical speed, fast enough to close distance, slow enough to stay quiet. The storm covers my approach. Every skill I learned in 30 years of security work comes back like muscle memory. How to place your feet to minimize noise. How to use terrain for concealment. How to track a target who doesn't want to be found. 200 yards, 150, 100. My phone vibrates again. Motion sensor beta, the one positioned at the boat launch clearing. Julian's at the river. I break into a run. The path opens into the clearing, where I keep the shed and the boat launch. Lightning flashes and the world turns white for one frozen instant. I see the shed. I see the river beyond it, black and swollen and moving like a living thing. I see another flash, brighter. Suddenly, I'm not in Marietta anymore. I'm standing in a younger version of this clearing on a summer afternoon in 1998. And Julian is 12 years old, and I'm teaching him to read weather patterns. See those clouds, buddy, cumulonimbus. They build vertical when the atmosphere is unstable. That's how you know a storm is coming. You watch the sky and you prepare. Julian had watched the sky his whole life. He'd learned from the best. And now he'd prepared. The memory vanishes. I'm back in the storm, back in October 2023, running toward the shed. I should have seen it earlier. The 4:37 a.m. kayak incident on October 3rd, Julian launching the kayak, paddling into darkness, returning 90 minutes later. That wasn't a failed attempt. That was a rehearsal. Timing the route, testing the conditions, learning the river's patterns just like I taught him to learn everything else. Be thorough, be patient, be ready. I round the shed corner and freeze. Julian's truck is parked in the shadows 20 yards away, engine still ticking warm. The driver's door is open. Rain pours through the gap, soaking the seat. But Julian isn't in it. I scan the clearing with the night vision monocular. The skiff is where I left it tarp secured. But there's something else now, an aluminum rowboat pulled onto the gravel boat launch. Julian's rowboat, the one from his apartment storage unit that I saw in the photos Detective Shaw showed me. Lightning flashes and I see him. Julian is already at the river, pushing the rowboat into black water. He's 50 feet away. He doesn't see me. The storm covers my approach the same way it covers his. He's already at the river. I sprint across the muddy clearing toward my skiff. Julian's already launched his aluminum rowboat slides into black water oars, biting into the current. He's 20 meters ahead when I rip the tarp off the skiff and shove it off the gravel. The 9.9 horsepower motor catches on the second pull. I throttle low thunder masks, the mechanical whine perfectly. Rain hammers my face. Lightning flashes and I see him clearly for half a second. Julian hunched forward, rowing hard toward the center channel, a black plastic bundle secured between his knees. That's Silas. He got into the house. Graham was right, I had 90 seconds and I missed it. The realization hits like a fist to the chest. While I was running through the woods while I was checking the shed, Julian was already inside the house. He had a key, or he picked the lock, or he never left in the first place. Maybe the motion sensors caught a deer, a branch, anything, and Julian walked out the front door while I was running to the back. The interception window closed before I even reached the river. I throttle down to idle, let the skiff drift. Julian's 50 feet ahead, now rowing into the teeth of the storm. Lightning reveals the West Virginia shoreline to our left, Kentucky to our right. We're in the center of the Ohio River, 200 yards from either bank water depth, 30 feet, and dropping as we drift toward the shallows downstream. Julian stops rowing. He ships the oars, lays them across the gunnels. The rowboat rocks in the current. I cut my motor completely. Silence except for rain and thunder and the river rushing past both hulls. Julian lifts the bundle. Through the rain I see him cradle it. His shoulders curve inward. His head bows. Lightning flashes and I see his face not manic, not angry, devastated, resigned. "I'm sorry," he says. His voice carries across the water, barely audible through the storm. They can't have you." He's talking to Silas. "You'll be with the water," Julian whispers. "Clean, safe from them. Move now or it's too late." I grab the oars I stowed in the skiff's silent propulsion. 3 pulls and I close the distance to 15 meters. Julian doesn't hear me. He's locked in his own world, holding the bundle, whispering words I can't make out. This is what the end of the world looks like. A father rowing away from his son in darkness, believing himself a savior. Julian leans over the side of the rowboat, places the bundle in the water, not drops, not throws, places, gently. The bundle floats. I see it clearly now, not just black plastic, a basket, foam-lined, wrapped in waterproof fabric, sealed, but buoyant. Julian made it float. He didn't build a weight to sink his son. He built a raft. Julian picks up the oars and rows away. He doesn't look back. His shoulders shake. He pulls hard for the Kentucky shore, disappearing into rain and darkness. "Julian," I shout. "Julian!" He doesn't stop. I don't chase him. I dive. The October River hits like a wall of ice. 42 degrees. The cold punches the air from my lungs. Current grabs me instantly vicious and strong, trying to drag me downstream. 4 strokes and I reach the basket. My fingers close on a woven handle. Movement inside. I got him, I gasp into the rain. I've got you, Silas. The basket is heavier than I expected. I kick hard, angling for the nearest shore, West Virginia side, shallows marked by reeds. The current fights me. My legs are already going numb. 30 seconds in water, this cold starts the hypothermia clock. I have maybe 3 minutes before my body stops responding. Alive, he's alive, 30 seconds in water, hypothermia clock starts now. I kick, pull with my free arm. The basket stays locked against my chest. 50 feet to shore, 40, 30. My right leg stops responding, then my left. I'm swimming with my arms alone, gasping rain and river water, indistinguishable on my face. 20 feet, 15. My boots hit mud. I don't remember standing. I crawl up the bank basket clutched to my chest, reeds cutting my hands. Behind me, blue lights strobe through the trees. Sirens wail from multiple directions. I collapse on solid ground and tear at the basket's waterproof wrapping. My fingers won't work properly. I use my teeth. The fabric falls away. Silas is inside, wrapped in dry blankets, wearing a tiny life vest. His face is red. His mouth is open. He's crying. You're okay. I gasp, pulling him against my chest. You're okay. I've got you. The baby's cry is the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. Footsteps pound down the bank behind me. Flashlight beams cut through the rain. Here, I shout toward the lights. Baby's safe. We're here. Graham Whitaker reaches me first, radio in one hand, flashlight in the other. He takes one look at me, collapsed in the mud, Silas clutched to my chest, both of us soaked and shaking. Medic, Graham shouts over his shoulder, then to me. Where's Julian? I point downriver into the darkness, into the storm, into the place where my son disappeared. He let the baby go and ran. Graham barks orders into his radio. Within 90 seconds, strobing blue and red lights lock down the riverbank a quarter-mile downstream. I watch from where the medics wrapped me in an emergency blanket, Silas pressed against my chest. 4 tactical spotlights ignite, turning night into surgical daylight, where the Kentucky shore curves back toward Ohio. Julian's aluminum rowboat drifts directly into the light. He guides it to shore with slow mechanical strokes, steps into the mud, looks up into the spotlights. 4 officers approach with weapons drawn, shouting commands I can hear even from here. On the ground, hands where we can see them. Julian doesn't run, doesn't fight, just stands there soaked in vacant arms at his sides. Graham's hand grips my shoulder. Stay here. I don't stay. I walk toward the lights, Silas bundled against me, medics calling after me. 30 meters from Julian when the officers reach him. They're shouting, weapons aimed, but Julian isn't moving. He's staring past them, at me. Did you... Julian's voice carries across the mud, distant and confused. Did you get him? The question lands like a knife between my ribs. An officer forces Julian face down into the mud cuffs, snapping onto his wrists. Julian doesn't resist. He turns his head cheek, pressed into the dirt, eyes locked on mine. Is he okay? Julian asks, not angry, not desperate, just asking like he's waking from a dream and trying to remember why he's here. Graham appears beside me, voice quiet. He's not running. It's over. But it's not over. It's just starting. Julian smiled at me when the officers pulled him up. Empty, dreamlike, like he was relieved, like some part of him wanted to be stopped. Marietta Memorial Hospital at 3 a.m. Looks like every emergency room I've ever seen. Fluorescent lights, antiseptic smell, controlled chaos. They take Silas from me gently. A nurse guides me to a plastic chair while they work. Dr. Celeste Ramsey emerges 20 minutes later, mid-40s, steady hands. The kind of calm competence you want in a crisis. She's the attending pediatrician, and her face tells me news before her mouth does. He's stable, she says, sitting beside me. Core temperature is 95.8 degrees, treatable. The waterproof layering held. My throat closes. Can I see him? In a moment, she pauses. Mr. Howard, 10 more minutes in that water, and we'd be having a very different conversation. You saved his life. 10 more minutes. The distance between my grandson living and dying, measured in seconds I didn't have. They let me hold Silas while warming blankets do their work. His tiny heartbeat thumps against my chest, steady, alive, furious at being cold and wet. I press my face against his head and breathe. I stopped it. I saved him. So, Why does it feel like I'm drowning? 4:30 a.m., Washington County Sheriff's Office. Two detectives sit across a metal table from me. Graham stands against the wall, arms crossed. I slide the surveillance notebook across the table. 42 days of entries, every observation, dated time-stamped, photographed. The younger detective flips through pages. His expression shifts from skepticism to something harder. "You documented all of this," he asks. "For 6 weeks, I'm a former federal security officer," I say. My voice sounds like it belongs to someone else. "When I saw the pattern, I logged it." The older detective studies a photograph I took on October the 3rd. Julian launching the kayak at 4:37 a.m. This was the rehearsal. Yes. Graham steps forward. His methodology saved the child. Without the surveillance positioning, without the tactical coordination, Silas Howard would be dead. The detectives exchange a look. The older one closes the notebook. 20 years. Julian is 37. He'll be 57 when he gets out. Silas will be 20. How do you reconcile being right and being destroyed, saving a life by ending another? I nod, sign the evidence chain of custody form, walk out into the pre-dawn darkness, feeling like a stranger in my own skin. 7:30 a.m., dawn light bleeds through hospital corridor windows. I'm sitting in a plastic chair outside the pediatric ward when Dr. Ramsey finds me again. "Mr. Howard," she says, sitting down. "I also evaluated your son in custody. I need to give you the psychiatric assessment." I look at her. "Wait, Julian is profoundly ill," she says carefully. "Severe dissociative episode consistent with acute schizophrenia exacerbated by trauma. The delusions were complete. He genuinely believed he was protecting Silas from a conspiracy, from enemies who wanted to harm the baby." The words hit like stones. "Can he—" I can't finish the sentence. "Can he recover? Can he be fixed? Can I have my son back?" I knew. Somewhere deep I knew Julian was sick. But I didn't know this. Didn't know it was this complete, this broken. "He thought he was saving Silas," I say. "Yes." Dr. Ramsey leaves. I sit in the corridor staring at nothing. Nurses pass. A doctor pages someone overhead. The world keeps turning, and I'm frozen in this plastic chair trying to understand how I failed my son so completely that he tried to drown his own child while believing he was a hero. Graham finds me there an hour later, sits beside me without speaking. Finally, his hand settles on my shoulder. "You did the only thing you could," he says quietly. "Sometimes that's all that anchors you. Grief is an anchor. It doesn't stop you from sinking, just slows the descent enough to breathe." Footsteps echo down the corridor. I look up. Ruth Howard walks toward us, face carved from stone. She's wearing the same clothes from yesterday. Her eyes are red. She's been crying for hours. "Ruth," I start. She stops 3 feet away, looks at me, at Graham, back to me. "I was at the jail," she says. Her voice is flat, dead. "I saw Julian." I stand. "How is he—" Ruth's face doesn't change. "He doesn't remember doing it," she says. "He thinks you kidnapped Silas from him." Ruth's words hang in the hospital corridor like smoke. "Julian doesn't remember. He thinks I kidnapped Silas. The delusion is complete." "What did he say to you?" I ask. Ruth's face doesn't change. "He said you've been planning this for months, that you manipulated everyone, that he was protecting Silas from you." The world tilts. I steady myself against the wall. "Ruth, I know," she says, voice cracking. "I know what happened. I know what you did. But he's my son Otis, and he's so broken." She walks past me without another word. Graham watches her go, then looks at me. "Give her time," he says. "Time, like that fixes anything." The courtroom is small, clinical, almost empty. Judge Vera Ashford, mid-50s, sharp eyes, gray hair, pulled back in a tight bun, presides from the bench. Defense counsel sits beside Julian in an orange jumpsuit. The prosecutor arranges files at her table. Dr. Ramsey sits in the gallery behind me. Julian stares at nothing. His face is thinner than I remember, hollow. The medication makes him vacant. Judge Ashford brings the gavel down once. "This court is convened for forensic commitment hearing, State versus Julian Michael Howard. Dr. Ramsey, the court has your 120-day evaluation. Summarize your findings." Dr. Ramsey takes the stand. Mr. Howard presents with acute schizophrenia, paranoid subtype triggered by traumatic stressor, specifically his ex-wife's near-fatal accident. The delusions are systematic and entrenched. He believes his father orchestrated a conspiracy to kidnap his son. The defense attorney stands. Your Honor, this condition is treatable. Supervised outpatient care with medication compliance would suffice. My client has no prior criminal history. The prosecutor rises. Your Honor, this defendant placed a 10-month-old infant in the Ohio River during a storm. The only reason the child survived is because the defendant's father conducted professional-grade surveillance and tactical interception. The risk calculus is clear. Without residential commitment, he will attempt again. Judge Ashford looks at Julian. Mr. Howard, do you understand these proceedings? Julian's eyes drift to the judge. When can I see my son? We're here to determine. He took him, Julian says flatly. My father took Silas. I need to get him back. 4 months, 120 days of psychiatric treatment, and he still believes the delusion completely. Judge Ashford's expression doesn't change. Mr. Howard, you are aware that you were arrested for attempted murder. I didn't hurt anyone, Julian says. I was trying to save him. The judge looks at me. Mr. Otis Howard, please take the stand. I walk to the witness box, raise my right hand, swear to tell the truth, sit down with the surveillance notebook in my lap. Mr. Howard, the prosecutor begins. Why did you conduct surveillance on your own son? Because I recognized pre-operational behavior, I say. My voice sounds steady, professional, like I'm briefing a client instead of testifying against my child. I have 4 decades of experience in protective services. I knew what was coming. Explain your methodology. I open the notebook. June 26, 2023. Julian moved into my home exhibiting paranoid ideation. By July 15th, the pattern was established: obsessive focus on the infant claims of external threats, erratic sleep schedule. I logged every observation with timestamps and photographs. I turned pages, exhibits admitted one by one, photos of Julian at 4:37 a.m. launching the kayak, transcribed statements about enemies and danger, tactical assessment of river access routes. I logged everything, so when it happened, there would be no question that it was systematic, not impulsive. Julian watches me from the defense table. His eyes are empty, not angry, not hurt, just empty, like he's looking through glass at a stranger. Julian looks through me like I'm transparent, the father who raised him, erased, replaced by a phantom enemy. Thank you, Mr. Howard, the prosecutor says. No further questions. I step down, walk past Julian. He doesn't react. Dr. Ramsey returns to the stand. Without residential treatment, recidivism risk approaches certainty. The delusions are fixed. He genuinely believes the infant was in danger. Given opportunity, he will attempt again. Judge Ashford reviews documents in silence for 2 minutes. Then she speaks. The court finds clear and convincing evidence of substantial danger to others. Pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 5122.15. Julian Michael Howard is committed to Riverbend Psychiatric Center for involuntary residential treatment duration. Indefinite pending state medical board certification of 0 risk to child or public. The gavel falls. Furthermore, Judge Ashford continues. Communication blackout is imposed. Mr. Julian Howard shall have no contact with the minor child or the reporting party until medical certification is complete. No contact, no visits, no calls. I just sentenced my son to a psychiatric prison and I might never speak to him again. Because it's the only way to keep everyone alive. 2 weeks later, I sit across from Clara Stafford, late 30s, blonde hair, in a practical ponytail, CPS badge clipped to her belt, in a windowless office at Child Protective Services. Silas sits on the floor, playing with blocks 14 months old, now babbling to himself. Clara reviews a thick file. Home inspection passed. Financial stability confirmed. Federal pension secure at $41,000 annually. Background checks pristine. References strong. Medical reports show the child is thriving. She closes the file, looks at me. You're 52 years old, Mr. Howard. That means you'll be 70 when Silas graduates high school. Have you considered that? I look at Silas. He's stacking blocks in a crooked tower, concentrating hard. I've been ready since I drove 14 hours just to be there when he took his first breath. I say. Clara watches me for a long moment. Then she pulls out a form, stamps it twice. Recommendation goes to Judge Ashford in 2 weeks, she says. You've done everything right, Mr. Howard. I've seen a lot of cases. This one, you gave up everything to save that child. Hope is a dangerous thing to feel when you've lost everything. It burns like frostbite warming. Thank you, I say. Silas knocks over his tower and laughs. March 8th. I stand in my kitchen holding a certified letter from Athens County Family Court. My hands shake as I unfold the single page. Judge Ashford's signature at the bottom. One word stamped in bold black ink. Granted. I stand in my kitchen on March 8th holding the letter with one word stamped across the bottom. Granted. Permanent legal guardianship. No more evaluations. No more uncertainty. Silas is mine until he turns 18. I sit down at the kitchen table, set the paper down, pick it up again. Read it twice to be certain I'm not imagining the words. Then I cry for the first time since the river. Silas crawls over and pulls himself up, using my leg, 15 months old, babbling something that might be a question. I pick him up and hold him while my shoulders shake and tears fall onto his head. He pats my face with a sticky hand. "You're mine," I say, officially, forever. He grins, says something that sounds almost like Poppy. Close enough. The path here wasn't straight. Back on January 15th, nearly 2 months ago, I was feeding Silas mashed carrots when my phone buzzed with Graham's text, "Evelyn arrested, federal marshals, Nevada. Details when you're ready." I set down the spoon, called him back. "She's been indicted," Graham said without preamble. "Organized wire fraud, identity theft, grand larceny. They've documented at least 3 victims across 4 states. Same pattern every time, marry, manipulate mortgage documents, disappear with the equity." I listened in silence. Silas banged his spoon on the high chair tray. "The feds froze her assets for restitution," Graham continued. "You'll see some of it. Won't cover everything, but it's something. Justice isn't fast, Otis, but it catches up." "Julian married a predator and never knew it," I said. "No wonder he broke." "She was a professional," Graham said. "This wasn't opportunistic. She refined the operation across multiple targets. Julian never had a chance." I thanked Graham, hung up, went back to feeding Silas. No triumph, just exhausted understanding of how my son was destroyed by someone who saw him as inventory. February bled into March after that. Silas turned 15 months. Started attempting words that almost made sense. The house at 412 River Street slowly stopped feeling like a crime scene and started feeling like a home. I built routines because routine is how you rebuild. After catastrophe, 1 meal, 1 bath, 1 bedtime story at a time, until the foundation holds again. Morning walks along River Road. Silas in the stroller pointing at birds. Afternoon picture books on the living room floor. Evening baths where he splashed water everywhere and laughed like it was the greatest discovery in human history. Then warm pajamas, a bottle, and sleep. Every day Silas was safe was a day I didn't fail. That had to be enough. Ruth visited twice during those weeks. The first time in mid-February, the second in early March. She held Silas carefully like he was made of glass. Said he looked healthy. Said I was doing well with him. Her voice was cordial, but distant, unable to reconcile being Julian's mother and Silas's grandmother simultaneously. "Have you heard anything?" she asked during the second visit. "No," I said. "The communication blackout is absolute." She nodded, set Silas down, left after 20 minutes. I didn't hear from Julian. Not a word, not a letter. The commitment order sealed him away as completely as if he'd died, except he hadn't died. He was just gone. And then March 8th arrived with that certified letter. 2 hours after opening it, I'm sitting in Marcus Dalton's office, a family law attorney in his early 60s with silver hair and reading glasses perched on his nose with Silas on my lap, chewing a plastic block. "A sign here, and initial here," Marcus says, sliding documents across his desk. "Congratulations, Otis. This is permanent." Permanent, I repeat. That's a word I haven't been able to believe in for a while. Marcus notarizes each signature with practiced efficiency, makes copies, hands me the certified original in a manila folder with the word permanent written on the tab in black marker. "You've been through hell," Marcus says, "but you did everything right. That boy is lucky to have you." I look down at Silas. He's oblivious to the weight of this moment, just happy to be gnawing on a block and sitting on my lap. At 52 years old, and I'm starting over, I say. But I'd do it 1,000 times for this boy. We walk out into crisp March morning. The sky is bright blue, temperature in the low 50s. First real hint of spring after a brutal winter. I lift Silas onto my shoulder. He babbles at the clouds, pointing at nothing and everything. Silas babbles nonsense at the clouds, and I realize this is what joy sounds like after you've forgotten the language. I think about Julian locked in Riverbend Psychiatric Center, mind shattered. I think about Evelyn in federal custody facing 20 years. I think about the 42 days I spent logging my son's descent into madness. I think about the storm and the river, and the moment I pulled Silas from Blackwater. Everything lost, everything saved. I'm never going to set him down. I say aloud to the sky, to the clouds Silas is babbling at, to whatever force in the universe is listening. It's both promise and acceptance. I will carry this responsibility and this love until my last day. The burden Julian couldn't bear, I'll carry voluntarily. Not because I have to, because I choose to. That evening, Silas falls asleep against my chest in the living room recliner, warm weight of him, rising and falling with each breath. I sit perfectly still, one hand on his back, and for the first time, allow myself to imagine the future. First day of kindergarten, me walking him to the bus stop, waving as he climbs aboard. Little league games, me in the stands cheering while he swings a bat too big for his hands. High school graduation, me 70 years old, in the audience watching him walk across the stage. It's possible, all of it. We survived the worst. The rest is just time and love and showing up every single day. My phone buzzes on the side table. Email notification. I pick it up with my free hand, careful not to wake Silas. The subject line stops my breath. Patient status update, Julian Howard. Sender, Riverbend Psychiatric Center. I open the email from Riverbend that evening in March 2024. Patient status update. Stable condition medication, compliance satisfactory, no imminent changes recommended. Clinical language. No indication Julian remembers anything. No request for contact. I close the phone, hold Silas closer, let the past stay where it is. December the 2025. 2 years after the river, I open the mailbox at 412 River Street and find a letter with Riverbend Psychiatric Center letterhead. My hands remember how to shake. Inside the house, I set my keys on the counter. Silas is in the living room watching cartoons, almost 3 years old. Now pajamas still on from this morning. Saturday routine, pancakes and cartoons and no agenda. I sit at the kitchen table, open the envelope. The letter is from Dr. Michael Brennan, Medical Superintendent. 2 pages typed formal. I read slowly. Patient demonstrates sustained cognitive stabilization following 26 months of residential treatment. Reality testing consistently appropriate. Delusional ideation absent for 14 consecutive months. Patient has achieved full comprehension of index offense and exhibits profound remorse. Medication regimen stabilized. Prognosis guarded but improved. I stop breathing. Patient has requested supervised communication channel with father. While facility policy permits conditional contact, at this stage of recovery, decision remains with family. Attached correspondence provided per patient request, reviewed by clinical team for appropriateness. There's a second page, handwritten. Julian's handwriting unmistakable even after 2 years. Dad, I remember everything now. I'm so sorry. Is there any way back from what I did? 3 sentences, 26 months of psychiatric treatment distilled into 12 words. He's in there. My son is still in there, buried under all that wreckage, clawing his way back to the surface. I set the letter down with hands that won't stay steady. Poppy, look, Silas calls from the living room. Tower tall as me. I walk to the doorway. Silas has built a block tower that reaches his shoulder, precarious and proud. He grins at me with a gap where his front tooth used to be, lost it last week eating an apple. That's amazing, buddy, I say. You're getting so strong. He knocks the tower over and laughs, already rebuilding. The house is child-proofed floor to ceiling. Outlet covers, cabinet locks, foam corners on every sharp edge. The walls are covered with his drawings, mostly scribbles, but some are recognizable as People House's dogs. The refrigerator has a magnet chart tracking his bedtime routine, brush teeth, pajamas, story, song, sleep. This boy has never known fear in his own home. Never wondered if the adults protecting him might hurt him. Never had a reason to doubt that tomorrow will be safe. I built that safety from the ruins of my son's breakdown. It's not negotiable. This piece cost everything. I won't risk it even for Julian's recovery. That evening after Silas's bedtime, teeth brushed, 3 stories, read, lullaby, sung. I sit at the kitchen table for an hour with Julian's note and a blank sheet of paper. A pen sits between them. I think about the boy Julian was. 7 years old, learning to swim in the Ohio River, fearless and laughing. 12 years old, reading weather patterns, asking questions about every cloud formation. 22 years old, graduating from Cincinnati with a business degree, hugging me so tight I couldn't breathe. I think about the man he became. 35 years old, marrying a woman who saw him as inventory. 37 years old, mind fracturing under trauma he couldn't process. 37 years old, placing his infant son in a river and rowing away. I think about the fractured soul he is now. 39 years old, remembering everything, living with the knowledge of what he tried to do. How do you measure love? By who you save or who you can't? Forgiveness isn't the question. I forgave Julian the night of the river the moment I understood his mind had shattered. Mental illness isn't a choice. It's a catastrophe that happens to people, not a moral failure. The question is access, and the answer, painful as it is, remains no. Silas doesn't remember Julian. He was 10 months old when it happened. His first word was "Poppy, not Daddy." He has no memory of the storm, the river, the cold water. No nightmares, no fear. He'll never know what almost happened to him. That's the gift I can give him, a childhood unmarked by the knowledge that his biological father tried to kill him, even believing it was salvation. Julian is my son forever, but he can't be Silas's father, not ever. I pick up the pen, write by hand words chosen with the precision I once used writing tactical assessments. Julian, I forgive you completely. I understood the night of the river that you were ill, not evil. Your mind broke under trauma no one should bear. But Silas has earned the right to grow up in absolute peace, and I will not compromise that for anything, including your recovery. My hand cramps. I keep writing. The door between you and him remains closed, not from malice, but from love for the boy you tried to save in the only way your broken mind understood. You are my son. That never changes. But this is where our roads diverge. I hope you find peace. I hope treatment gives you a life worth living, but that life cannot include Silas. I'm sorry. I sign it, fold it, seal it in an envelope addressed to Riverbend Psychiatric Center. Attention, Julian Howard. Set it by the door for the morning mail. Some doors close not because there's no love on the other side, but because there's too much at stake to risk opening them again. On the wall above the kitchen table hangs a framed photograph from Silas's second birthday last October. Cake smeared across his face, chocolate frosting in his hair, eyes wide with pure joy at the candles I helped him blow out. Ruth is in the background holding him tightly. I'm beside them, hand on Silas's back. A family fractured and rebuilt. Not what any of us planned, but real. I touch the frame with my fingertips. My son is gone. I say to the empty kitchen, to the sleeping house, to the ghost of the boy Julian used to be. You had a daddy who loved you very much, I say. But he got sick in his mind and couldn't take care of you, so now I'm your dad. Silas tilts his head, processing this with the gravity only a 3-year-old can bring to scrambled eggs in a Tuesday morning. So you're my dad now? Yes, forever. He nods, once satisfied the way children accept large truths that would crush adults, and takes another bite. Can we go see the ducks at the river? Something loosens in my chest. I'd been bracing for tears, for questions I didn't have answers to, for the moment the weight of this family's history landed on his small shoulders. Instead, I got ducks. Yeah, buddy, we can go see the ducks. We walked 10 minutes to the riverbank that afternoon, Silas stopping to investigate every frozen puddle, every crow, every stick that might be a sword. The December air is crisp but gentle. Ohio moves quietly today, silver in the winter light. Silas crouches at the water's edge and peers in with the focused curiosity of a scientist. Dad, he tests the word like new shoes checking the fit. Right here. Why does the river keep going? I kneel beside him. Because that's what rivers do. They don't stop. They just carry things forward. He thinks about this. Finds a stone. Throws it with everything he has. Watch the ripples spread and dissolve. I want to come back tomorrow, he announces. Deal. He takes my hand for the walk home, his small fingers trusting and warm. The river carries its ghosts downstream behind us. Ahead of us, dinner, a bath, 2 stories, and sleep. Tomorrow, we get tomorrow. That's everything. And to you listening to my story, remember this. Sometimes the people we love most can become the greatest threat to those we're sworn to protect. Looking back, I wonder if I could have seen the signs earlier. Could I have gotten Julian help before his mind shattered? I don't know. But I learned that protecting family isn't always about keeping everyone together. Sometimes it's about making impossible choices that tear you apart to keep the innocent safe. Don't make my mistake of waiting too long to act when you see danger even from someone you love. This family story taught me that love doesn't always look like forgiveness and reunion. Sometimes love looks like boundaries that can never be crossed. The hardest lesson from this family betrayal was accepting that I could forgive Julian completely while still choosing to protect Silas from him forever. That's not cruelty, that's wisdom born from family betrayal. I believe God gave me the skills and instincts I needed to save that boy, even though it meant losing my son in the process. Every family story involving betrayal forces you to decide who deserves your protection most when you can't protect everyone. If this family story moved you, please leave a comment below. What would you have done in my position? Would you have made the same choice? Share this with someone who needs to understand that family betrayal doesn't always come from hate. Sometimes it comes from mental illness. And if you haven't already subscribed to Revenge Dad for more true stories about impossible choices. Thank you for staying until the end. Some details have been adjusted for storytelling, but the heart of this message about love, sacrifice, and impossible choices is what I hope stays with you.